Thank you for taking the time this morning, your evening, to talk. I'm really stoked for this conversation. It's the first like this that I've ever done. I wouldn't say new to the AI of it all. I've been paying attention for a while to what's going on and very keen to understand it and demystify a lot of it because, as I'm sure you're well aware, folks in the entertainment industry and many creative industries, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of hesitation of how do we actually use these tools ethically to improve workflows instead of replace fill in the blank, and I think coming on the heels of all the controversy or hoopla, rather, I wouldn't say controversy, but there were just a lot of articles specifically on Brutalist and some films that were Oscar nominated, having used this technology, which opened up a lot of conversation about, in our industry, how do we denote this? How do we take this into consideration doing awards campaign? So thank you for responding to my unsolicited LinkedIn request to come on the show. I really appreciate it. So I guess I always like to start a little bit at the beginning, just like what inspired this particular technology within the AI, and what was your journey to getting it to a place where you could start to partner with some of these bigger players?
I guess it started a while ago, before this whole AI era, more than 8-9 years ago, as an idea we came up with. And the idea was just to make one voice sound exactly like another voice using technology, using some simple machine learning techniques or whatever was available back then. Myself and my partner, we've been exploring, we've been playing around, and then at some point we understood that, look, it could be theoretically possible to create a synthetic voice on that level of quality and usability where Hollywood studios would appreciate it, where sound engineers would be able to mix it into Dolby Atmos. And that's a very cool challenge we can work on. We can get very good technical minds around solving this challenge. We can unite amazing sound engineers in the team around this challenge. So we pitched this idea of using a technology of synthetic voice in high-profile productions to film studios, to some video game companies, animation companies initially. And what we heard back was, that's usable for us. We're gonna use it. It does make sense, but the quality is not there. Whatever we see in the market does not even closely fit doesn't get it there in terms of
How long ago was that? How long ago that they were saying the quality?
Back in 2016, 2017, but I wouldn't say that situation changed much, because right now, most of the synthetic voice solutions out there are no good for sound engineers in Hollywood studios, as well as it was a while ago, because most of the solutions out there are designed for mass market. What we've been inspired about is to meet those quality demands. And when we understood that quality, when it comes to sound, is a very subjective thing, what we had to build in Respeecher is a constant feedback loop between two areas of knowledge. One would be technical knowledge, building those models using AI to get one voice to be transformed into another voice. But another big part of knowledge is sound knowledge. Sound engineers, those people with golden ears who can hear naturalness, who can hear speaker identity, artifacts, all those things. And those worlds, they speak different language. So we had to mix them all together. We had to bake this expertise within the company. It took us a little bit to get to the point where we started working with Hollywood studios. We launched the company in 2018. In 2019, we already been in some works for top studios. And what we started with was speech-to-speech voice conversion technology, meaning there is a human being whose voice needs to be converted into the voice of another human being. And what we were focused on is apply the voice itself, meaning just apply a mask of the vocal apparatus so it would sound exactly like a target voice. But all the performance, all the accent, all the acting is being taken from a real human. And that's why we got to the point where big studios use us, because we are taking from the humans what they do best. They act, they perform, and we apply technology to remove the limitation of a human being tied to the particular voice they have in a particular moment of their life.
So was the first big partnership that you guys did then Mandalorian, or what was the first big one that put you guys on the map and made other Hollywood studios or other big companies sort of take notice?
Yeah, I guess Mandalorian was one of the first big public ones. We also did a very cool piece with Richard Nixon in Event of Moon Disaster with MIT and Kenny AI, a piece of alternative history to bring attention to what technologies can actually do to history. We won Emmys for this project. It was before Mandalorian. And over 2019, we've been working on some projects, but I mean, being a small startup in this ecosystem, it's really hard to negotiate publicity rights on the very initial projects. So we got to the point where we could initiate publicity rights from 2020 and on.
Yeah, I want to back up a little to the Richard Nixon example that you mentioned, because I obviously have gone deep into your website. And I watched this, and, essentially for the listeners, what it is, it's in an alternate reality where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin don't return from the moon landing in '69. And it's terrifying, because it is so well done. It is so effective. And essentially the whole piece is Richard Nixon giving a speech that is not real of what he would have said to address America had these astronauts not returned. And if someone did not know the real events of history and how it's unfolded, you could rewrite history in a negative way, right? And I understand that this exercise was to show that exact thing, the dangers of using this technology in the wrong ways. But I guess it's such a big conversation, and I'm sure you talk about this all the time, but how do we prevent technology like this in this era that we're living in from getting in the wrong hands, where deep fakes and there's so much on the internet that is already alienating people and separating us instead of uniting us? How do we use that and actually have a moral compass to make sure that it doesn't end up in the worst version of how this could be?
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of this project in Event of Moon Disaster was to showcase what technologies can do to the history, and it was very clear about the fact that it's an alternative reality. But what inspired the project, Halsey Burgun and Francesca Panetta were the co-directors of this project with MIT, that they found out this speech that was written in case if Apollo 11 mission goes wrong. And this speech is extremely powerful. It stayed in archives and no one ever touched it. So it was accessible only for hundreds, maybe thousands of people. But the speech itself, it provides a lot of content and context on.
So the speech had actually been written. It just lived in archives in the event.
I mean, no one knew how it would go.
That's true.
They were sitting and waiting for the results of the mission. And there were two speeches written. One in case if everything goes well, another one in case if there's a failure, if the mission doesn't work out.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely want to link that because it's fascinating. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, in terms of the moral compass, I mean, when we started the company, we understood that, look, we are building a technology that can fool people. We are applying this technology to an amazing use cases we foresee for this technology. So we put very strict ethical code of conduct at Respeecher, which actually has been adopted by many synthetic voice and visual companies afterwards, because we've been in very early innings of the space. And this ethics code has been very strict, and it remains the same. So we always required permission and consent from voice owners or their representatives to recreate the voices, but we often have to go deeper. We also understood for ourselves that we will never be attached to active politicians. So our technology wouldn't be used in politics. And we've seen a lot of inbound for that, even though they have permissions. So the politicians say, I have a permission, so can you run a lot of voiceover for my campaigns? We cannot. But we even had to go deeper into the project's essence itself, which is quite unusual for a startup. for a small vendor in the industry. For instance, we had one rapper that wanted to do a project with us, and they provided their permission, the rapper's permission. The thing is, he was in jail, and we thought, okay, it might be fine for a rapper to be in jail as part of the culture, right? We asked to see the texts of the lyrics of those songs they wanted to release, and it was all right, like rapping, right? Some cursing, some stuff like usual rapping. But then we had to go deeper, and we had to look what he was in jail for, and there were some really bad things, so we couldn't be associated to that. So we had to think about all the projects we've been engaged into, not just from the standpoint of this classical ethics position: permission first, no likeness rights are being abused, no copyright is being abused, but also from the standpoint of how the technology is being shown in this project, and how the technology of the synthetic voice could be associated with some bad things we are scared about when it comes to deep fakes and stuff. Because I mean, there are a lot of misuses out there.
Yeah, and I mean, how big is your team? How much, like, do you have a system internally of how you go about looking and assessing projects to make this decision?
Yeah, we do have. We have an ethics department at Respeecher. The team is now 32. It's rather small. But
the whole team, or just the ethics team, is 32?
The whole team.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That's very small.
Yeah, but in many cases, those decisions in terms of ethics are straightforward, because we are engaged with a huge studio who pays a lot of attention to what they do and how they do it. And it's rarely cases when we are on the edge, so we need to go deep. It's either no permission at all, or something bad about the project, or it's a clean, right project with permission and all this stuff. We don't have to go deep. And something that is in between doesn't happen that much often. I would say maybe once a week or once per 2 weeks, we have to go and look into something deeper.
Yeah.
And it's not obligatory about misuse. It's also about the fact of Respeecher being attached to the project we don't like, or we think is somewhat misleading, or it's about the brand, general brand of synthetic voice being shown from the angle we don't want it to be shown from.
Yeah. And I want to clarify that, this is not a technology that anyone can go to the website and pay a fee and use. Like, you have to submit a request as to what your project is. I'm sure you guys do a ton of vetting, and then you get on a phone call. So it's not like some of these other AI technologies that are currently on the market that are super accessible to the common folk, which is fantastic. And I think a great way that you can keep those wrong hands away from the technology, which I think is great, And your website says that 80% of Hollywood and top tier creative companies use Respeecher in the marketplace. So given the size of your team, how many projects can you guys handle at any given time?
Over time, we delivered almost 200 projects of a different scale over those 7 years. Okay. Over the last year, we delivered more than 60.
60,
so
okay.
The scale of the projects goes up because the technology is being improved, and the turnaround is being shortened in general. But still, there are plenty of stuff we are doing that is taking months to deliver. There is a lot of stuff that might require a couple of weeks of our team to deliver.
Yeah, that's interesting. And with the ethical code, like when you have these users that you're onboarding, certainly you'll have like well-known actors, right? In the example of BRUTALIST, but then you're synthesizing it with voices of, perhaps in this case, native Hungarian speakers. Hungarian actors don't have necessarily the same union protections. I don't know enough about like other markets in that way, but like think about the Screen Actors Guild, and there's certainly a lot of protections. And you saw the strikes that happened 2 years ago around a lot of this use around this. Yeah, everybody saw it. The world saw it. But I guess I'm curious, like when you think about working with actors that are not performers that are not covered under the SAG agreement, I would assume, again, these Hungarian actors perhaps are not. How do you approach the level of integrity, I guess, to protect them as well if they don't have necessarily the same union protections?
First, let's take a look at what SAG agreements was about. So it was partially about justifying use of synthetic voice, synthetic likeness in projects. And the way how it's suggested to be used in projects and how it's justified to be used in projects, even a little bit lighter than Respeecher's code of conduct. It's all about compensation, it's all about permission, but in some cases, studios can do ADR without permission according to the SAG rules. Also, we can ask SAG about what's their take on Respeecher, and SAG has been appreciative to Respeecher approach to the industry. Over all those years, we've been quite active. What the industry is afraid of is about the case where actors would be eliminated, but the need in their work would be eliminated. But in the course of all those hundreds of projects we delivered, I wouldn't say I could recall any where a job was eliminated. We actually need more jobs. We need to employ those actors from the other regions that speak other languages when the perfect accent needs to be made. We need to employ people to be able to perform in the voice of a celebrity who does not have access to the microphone in the age of 17, right? Like we did with in the movie here. So it's all about embedding the tech to enhance humans. Humans are limited. They're significantly limited in terms of their voice right now, and your voice tomorrow is slightly different from your voice today. And our voices, they change and they're affected by many factors. Also, we are limited to the languages we know, to the accents we can do. And at some point, we are limited to the performance. For instance, some of the voice actors are great performers, but they're tied to their particular voice they have in a particular moment of their life. A female voice actor who is 60 years old would never be doing a job for a character that is a young male of 17 years old. With the technology, she could. It's possible to do with the technology. And it's about enhancing the acting skills and giving them ability to bring more flavors.
Yeah. But I guess the counter argument to that example is like, why not just give the job to like a 17-year-old boy, Like, are we taking away an opportunity from that person? And, I think an example of that is in Cyberpunk. I was reading that you guys had the Polish actor who plays Victor. He, I guess, died during the production of the game. And from what I read, you guys actually, or not you guys, but the game tried to find another actor who was comparable to him to step into the role, and they were not able to for whatever reasons. And so with your technology, you guys were able to essentially keep his voice in the game and use it throughout. And most people probably were none the wiser. But I guess the question then...
the speech project, they still found the performance.
Yeah.
So the performer
they did. Okay.
was needed to be there. And there are plenty of cases when in our projects, sound-alikes are source speakers for our model. So actually, sound-alike can do great job in terms of making the performance be there, making the accent be there, a human being. But the voice would still be not at 100% identity there. And that's where the technology is being applied.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that, if you take somebody from history, right, that like obviously we're not going to have a huge enough sample of their voice because it's not been recorded, but you have an actor that can do a good enough interpretation of them, you can then create the voice, I don't know how you would call it, the model, the blueprint of that person's, that that historical figure's voice to then be able to create what X person would have sounded like if they were giving a speech or if they were being interviewed in a documentary about their lives or whatnot?
Frankly, we try to stay away from such projects when there is like an approximation is being
I
made
see.
to a
Okay.
particular voice. But the technology is at the point where we can do a lot, and existing recording is there. So for Vince Lombardi, for Super Bowl, we had just a couple of minutes of clean voice of Vince Lombardi recorded. For Endurance documentary, which is one of my favorite projects of 2024, we had recordings of Shackleton and his team on the very first recording device, Vox cylinder, that was taken from the ocean when they went to the ship. And you can imagine the quality of those recordings. But the thing is, when it comes to historical projects, with the combination of technology and this white glow sound stuff our team is doing with the technology and with the data, we can get those voices out pretty identical to how they sounded back then.
Okay.
And voice actors are needed to perform in their style. They needed to get the accents right. They needed to get the style of performance right. They needed to make this piece of content sound. We would just convert their voices to the voices of those historical voices.
What are your thoughts, and what do you say to people that, particularly in the entertainment industry, are afraid of platforms like yours cutting jobs from the industry, whether it's not just voice actors, but the various people in the pipeline within sound design or sound period? Like how, if you had to guess, how many middlemen are replaced when someone uses your software, but then conversely, how many jobs do you think are being created with this new technology?
First of all, I think there should be a very clear distinction of what the technology and the company does. If the company does enhance humans and does that ethically, that should be appreciated in the industry. If the company allows massive misuse of the technology, porn to be created, the voices of Hollywood celebrities, and political interventions and intrusions, that's not okay, not just from the quality standpoint, but also from the ethical standpoint. There are plenty of tools that went through a backlash, that went through a lot of misconception in the industry around those tools that are actually production tools. And that's exactly where we are. We are enhancing humans on a significant scale. We are helping creators get their creative vision in the exact way they have it. And we are being utilized as a tool and as a very hands-on service. So it's not like you just throw something at AI and AI gives you back the whole voiceover. Sound engineers on the client end and on our end are usually working really close together through many iterations. So there are usually at least 2 to 5 iterations on any like high-profile Hollywood projects. But when it comes to Star Wars type projects, I mean, those guys are crazy about what they want to hear in the result. They can do thousands of takes for each line, and then we use 12 models to convert those thousands of takes.
Wow.
And they go through all that, and they pick some of those, and they adjust some of those with our team and with some iterations of the model. So it's not an automated process when you need to achieve high quality of the sound. And that's exactly the case how it was in Brutalist, how it was in EMILIA PEREZ, how it was in Better Man, and all those other projects you recently heard.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, you know, to hear that the technology has been used and embraced by so many studios for quote unquote a long time compared to how long the idea of AI has been in the sort of general population mind frame is interesting to me. And you know, I think we have this problem in Hollywood where it's like whoever gets to the narrative first gets to control the narrative, right? And we're all storytellers, and so the person who writes the best narrative sort of wins. And I think for me, like
That's why I'm so mad at some studios when they don't know how to navigate through proper PR around the film and about AI being used in the film. And we say to them, guys, you should control your narrative. Go up front and say how exactly you use the technology, because when it would pop up, you wouldn't be in control of this narrative. And if you're in a race for an award, it would be used in the race, though it should be used in a different way. And being upfront about the technology and being upfront about the details of how the technology was used is very important. However, there are some cases when they reasonably decide not to do that. For instance, Jon Favreau in The Mandalorian, he didn't want to be talking about Luke's voice in specific. And the reason he didn't want, in my opinion, is because there is a lot of bias that could affect the way how we treat what we see. So if we knew that Luke's voice was synthesized when we watched the movie, we might have heard something, but we didn't know. And no one questioned the voice until Jon Favreau went out for making of Mandalorian and told, that's how we use the technology. That's what actually was achieved using the technology.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like, I think it's misguided, and it's in this time that we're in, particularly in entertainment and Hollywood, that we're in a massive shift, and there's a lot of change, and there's a lot happening at once with certainly all of the new AI technologies that can be really scary for a lot of people. There's a huge market contraction. Obviously, there's an economic crisis all over the world, like the pandemic. We're still coming out of that 5 years later, and I feel like it's all got clumped together. If this was 5 years ago, I think it would have been received, and the conversation around it would have been perhaps treated a little differently on the offset, so that you don't have a bunch of people that are really just creatives, actors, writers, animators, voice actors, who, instead of approaching this from a place of curiosity, they panic, understandably so, because again, the narrative and the way it's presented is that yes, it can and may, not necessarily Respeecher, but other technologies can and may, definitely reduce some workload for some people. But what I always wonder is, like, where is the opportunity for new career paths that are potentially going to be created? Like, if we have technologies that improve the quality of, not the quality, but technologies that improve the speed at which you can do stuff, how much time does that give you back to actually be creative, to do other things, to create new things? Because you don't have to take the 30 hours that would take you to do one thing, now takes you 3. So now you have 27 hours to do a new thing, right? So it's interesting because, again, there's just a lot of this fear-based information out there, and I'm very sympathetic to that because I understand that fear. But I wanted to have you on because I want to empower everybody to really do their homework. It's not like AI is great, it's everybody's best friend. I don't think that's the case for everything. I really don't. But it just has to be used intentionally and ethically. And I think, to your point, it's like, how do you define what is ethics, right? Because it comes down to a very deeper conversation of, like, what are your values as a human? What are your values as a society, as a people, which opens up a larger can of worms of, like, existentialism, you know what I mean? Of, like, how do we navigate this new human existence? We've all seen these sci-fi movies of the future and what it looks like when robots take over, and I think everyone is understandably afraid that that's a potential reality that we're going to be entering.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of your point on, like, 5 years ago, it's a yes or no, because our technology, it has changed over the last 5 years, but the basic setup of our technology and Respeecher services has not changed. What changed around is the huge pop-up of all those other technologies that are also called AI, that are also called deep learning, that got some massive viral effect and some massive adoption in the industry. I mean, ChatGPT appeared, plenty of synthetic voice companies that are doing that unethically, in our opinion, appear, who are opening the doors to clone whoever voice without checking it. And that brings a lot of scare, a lot of fear in the industry. Our response to fear is the same as it was 5 years ago. So we have very strict ethics policy. we have quality and we have trust, and we build the whole company on the reputation, on the trust. That's been our cornerstone from the very first days. And that's actually something that enables us to be engaged in such massive projects, being still somewhat a small company, just a group of like 30, 40 people who are working on several dozens of projects per year.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. I mean, I guess what I wanted to ask you is like, let's just do like a role play, right? Where I'm a person who has now submitted a form on your website, and I'm, let's say, Brady Corbet. I want to make the Brutalist. I want your help with this, the accent manipulation, air quotes. Like, walk me through that exact process of like when you engage with me, the questions that you ask, and then sort of the process of fine tuning that. Because I think, again, a lot of people may have this fear of like, well, what if the actor doesn't like the performance that is generated as the end result? How much control do they have to go back to that? Then who is responsible for the performance if somebody wins an award? Can you just give credit to the actor, or how much does the editor, not just of the actual film, but of the voice, technically, get to be a part of that win?
Yeah, in our engagements with studios when it comes to projects like this are pretty straightforward. So we get inbound, or we reach out to them and we talk about different stuff. Then we get through quite sophisticated NDA procedure, because we've been introduced to some content and context, which is in very early days of this film creation. And the very first thing we ask whether the permission for the target voice would be in place. And we need a copy of this permission. And often we are not just receiving this permission from a target voice, but also we counter-sign from Respeecher this permission that we are going to delete those models if they wish. We are not going to use any material for anything else besides this project. So we commit to whatever level of comfort the target voice wants to have within the project. Then we have quite a few discussions about what the performance aspect of our models, of synthetic voice models, is needed. Whether the voice has to whisper, whether the voice has to cry, sing, do some unusual stuff like speak unusual phonemes in unusual language. Then we run some pilots. It's usually several weeks of pilots when we either use some voice on our end to showcase how it could work, or we actually do a pilot project with the voice that is needed for a client. In terms of performance, I mean, it's all been human performance in our case. And in the case of Brutalist, they use just tiny bits of vowels and some other sounds as a post-editing tool. So it's not like this could have ever affect the performance of an actor. I couldn't even imagine that. That's just fixing some stuff. I mean, you're doing pitch shifting. You're doing some correction on post-production. You can do some Frankenstein. You can change one word from there to here. You can change one letter from there to here. You're doing that on constant basis since we invented how to record the sound. It's the same process. Just the difference is for those tiny bits you're injecting or replacing, you have better choice. You have better options.
Right. So in this scenario, if you guys, as I understand it, there were Hungarian actors who did some of the same dialogue, and then you were able to sort of pick parts of whatever it was that, the actors couldn't necessarily hit, that didn't sound as authentic as it could have, and you just morphed or masked it with that. But the actors, the American actors, were still doing, not just American, because Felicity Jones is not American, but like the actors that are the ones that we know in the film, they still did those accents. They still worked with a dialect coach to speak in a Hungarian dialect and understand how to speak that as well as they could, how to speak the language as well as they could. But certainly they are limited, right? Because they are not native speakers. And that's where you bring in native speakers to essentially, with their nativeness of that language enhance their performance in a way that they truly would never be able to, because they'll never have the 40, 50 years of experience of speaking that language.
That's correct. I mean, they spent months with an accent coach to do this Hungarian stuff, and still, you would have to be born Hungarian in order to be able to make it that smooth as Brady wanted it to be in the field. So that's his creative vision. He wanted it to be perfect for a reason, and that's one of the reasons he got this amazing piece to Golden Globes, to Oscars, to all this stuff. It's one of the best projects of the previous year. And there are some certain things you just cannot teach people, or it would take you years to achieve those things. And those could be some consonants and vowels when it comes to accent. And therefore, an input from a Hungarian speaker should have been used. And I guess their editor, one of their editors, was Hungarian, and he recorded some of the lines, so some of the pieces where they needed to perfect that stuff. And again, I'm sure there were many dozens of takes for each line recorded, and many conversions sent back, and that process of back and forth to make it sound exactly as it should sound, it's a very heavy one. I wouldn't say that such projects do make a lot of sense for an agency that is doing such projects, because I mean, it's really hard to predict how much workforce, how much servers costs you would need to put into that. But I mean, it's amazing stuff, and that's a cool part of that, is to be at the peloton of the technologies being used in the highest quality productions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting. And as someone who was born in Brazil and Portuguese is my native language, it's like I understand that very well. I didn't learn English till I was 9. And so like I have a very good ear for accents and language in general because of that. And so when I hear someone certainly speaking English or Portuguese with an accent, like for me, it's just so clear. And I can always pretty much guess how long they've been speaking English or where they learned, because of these intrinsic things of the human race and how we've evolved, and the regionalisms as well that you pick up. So, like for me, it didn't bump at all. I thought it just enhanced what was already there and made it that much more. My ability to suspend my disbelief for this world and for these characters was just like elevated that much more, And I guess, I'm curious, how does it feel to be such a young company and know that now you have an actor who has taken like the Best Actor Academy Award, and knowing that you helped sort of in a small way craft his performance and craft that win?
That's very exciting. That's very exciting to see the name of our company and our team members, those sound engineers, in the credits of those films. And also it's so cool to see some of those projects in the very, very, very early days, and being able to follow the film craft from the inside. I mean, we were introduced to the Better Man movie back in 2021 or a while ago. That was just an idea of Michael Gracie. There was just a script that he had, and it was so cool to follow all this creation project throughout. That inspires our team a lot. And also we are very inspired when we are doing some historical projects, like the Endurance project is really cool. Getting the voices of Shackleton and his team talk about endurance on National Geographic is very important for us as Ukrainians as well. Get the only company in the world who recreated the voices that were recorded on the very first recording device on the Vox cylinder.
Wow.
114 years ago. I mean, it's
that's so awesome. Cool. Yeah.
It's an exciting.
Yeah. And I know we talked a little off mic about the power of this technology to make sure that the way that we do tell the historical facts or how we continue to tell the stories that have come before us help inform and empower future generations, because so much gets lost. And I'm so curious what, like, 50 years from now, what of this era is going to, like, still be around, because it's like the largest quantity of anything since the beginning of time, it seems like. And so how could we possibly store all of this and where? So it's I think it's exciting. And, before we wrap up, the one thing that, obviously I'd be curious to your thoughts on is the environmental impact of AI, right? Like the water cooling systems for servers, et cetera. So I guess I'm curious, like, how are you guys, how is your company thinking about this and trying to be as environmentally conscious as you can?
The thing is, what differs us from other synthetic voice, synthetic speech providers and other AI providers, that from the very early days, Respeecher was forced to work with very small amount of data, with small amount of high quality data to meet those high quality requirements. And that means that general size of our models is way smaller than those huge models we are using on daily basis, like ChatGPT. And I would say that the cost of servers and the environmental impact of those servers we are doing for a project, like a movie project, would be comparable to just a user using ChatGPT for several days. So it's not that big as you might imagine. Those models are not that heavy in terms of their size. It does take some power to run them. It does take some power to train them, but it's not that that crazy big as other AIs needed to be.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so in 5 to 10 years, what is your hope for Respeecher? Where do you hope to see the company? What's your thoughts on where things are headed? And I won't hold you to this unless you have a crystal ball that I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, it's a crazy question, right? For a startup.
Yeah, it is. It is.
In current environment, in the world we live now, I haven't opened the news today yet, but I would be curious to see what's happening there. It's really hard to say what's going to be in 5 years, but we built a foundation. Our foundation at Respeecher is quality and trust. Quality comes from our approach to this work, to this craft, to be very deep into high quality content and requirements for the high quality content. Trust is coming from biggest Hollywood studios and individuals, those talents, actors who are given their green light, given their okay to use Respeecher in a particular project. And we built everything on top of those two pillars. Therefore, we see Respeecher as a provider, a trusted provider of synthetic voices for talents and a platform for content makers, for studios, for video game animation studios, for independent content makers. And we see that there is a lot of democratization happening over the last 5-7 years in the industry. I mean, you need less to be able to compete with at Oscars, right? I mean, Brody was able to do this film not because of AI, but because of the approach to filming for just 10 mils or so, right?
Yeah.
There are some pieces that would take you several hundred K, and you would be able to get Cannes Lions on those pieces. You can do pieces at few thousand K, and you would still be able to compete. And the requirements in terms of quality for those pieces are not getting lower. They're getting higher. Because, I mean, the technology does allow you to get high quality sound, high quality video in the content. And that's the world I want to live in. I want independent, small content makers to be able to bring and get the deserved attention to their pieces they've been crafting for years, their vision. And that's very exciting to be part of this.
Yeah, that's awesome. As far as projects that you have going on, what are some of the things that you're really excited about in these next few years personally that you can speak of course? I know you have NDAs and such.
Yeah, there are almost none of the projects we can speak of, uh, which are in production right now. Because I mean, it's a common case. Before the release, you're not telling much. There are some cool historical projects. I love those historical projects because it feels so important to bring more colors to history. Because our current generations should have paid more attention to history. If I would pay more attention to history and my fellow Ukrainians would pay more attention to our history, this awful war wouldn't happen to such a scale it happened here. There are some very cool non-media projects we are doing. For instance, we are bringing this technology to healthcare for laryngectomy patients. We tried this stuff in 2022. And the case is in the condition of throat cancer, there could be a surgery where the vocal box is being removed. And those people, they don't have vocal apparatus. So they have to speak using a device they put here, and it's called larynx, and it captures their articulation and the pressure of air they have there. And they sound really flat. It's really hard to understand what they're saying. So we applied our real-time voice-to-voice technology on top of those voices. It made them sound better. And then we started to run trials with some healthcare institutions in the US and in the UK. And now we are working on a project where this piece of technology would be brought to several hundred thousand patients in early 2026. And it meant a lot.
That's awesome.
It does change the way how they would
And do you think there'll be a way that you can grab the voice profile before it was taken away by the throat cancer to inject it in real time so that when the person speaks, it's as close to their real voice as possible?
Yeah, we have cases like that. And
oh, amazing.
I mean, to some point, luckily, with the technology penetration to our lives over the last years, most of us, we have some recordings of our voice, even some voice messages. And so it's possible to reproduce a voice having even small amount of data.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone who has been doing this podcast for a long time, I love recording voices and recording moments via sound only, because I have learned that, well, it's been proven, but like the way you experience memory when you only have sound and no visuals is incredibly different and actually more robust than if you have the visuals there to accompany it. And so like I often will take I have a hand recorder, and even like during the holidays with my family, just kind of like captured the environment of what was going on and conversations with people, and you can feel so much through someone's voice, you know? So it's a very powerful medium that I think people overlook because there's so much focus on what we see. But yeah, so yeah.
And I mean, we are yet to see voice first interfaces because those have not yet been developed, right? Those were developed for people with vision disabilities, not for general audience.
Yeah.
And now the technology aspect of our life has changed drastically. We communicate with our computer or smartphone as with a partner. And the best way to communicate with something that's a partner is through verbal channel of communication. As well, our hearing is way more sensitive than our vision, right? Because that's something we used through evolution to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
So in caves, I mean, we had to hear this lion coming. We couldn't see lion for half of the day, right? With our eyes, we had to hear it.
Yeah.
Therefore, this channel is way more sensitive.
Yes. But again, overlooked.
And that's why it's so hard to create something really cool in sound, because to get through uncanny valley, it just you might be like 95% there, but the remaining 5% would be the hardest thing to achieve. because we are so sensitive to all those tiny imperfections in sound. But when we look at the picture, it might not be perfect, but our mind would make it perfect for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's truly fascinating. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and being on the show. I think what you guys are doing is really cool, and I appreciate the steps and the focus you've put into as a company and making sure this is used ethically, that you're here to empower creatives and not take away, and that's important for me, which is why I wanted to make sure we gave you the space to come and talk about your company and the technology on the other side of the Oscars. So thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.